Welcome to Within WordPress, the podcast you all love, right? Nathan, love was the
Yes,
word?
I
Yes.
love it. I love it.
And why do you love it? Because we talk about and we talk with all the wonderful people making up our wonderful community. With me today is somebody who, if you've ever listened to a podcast in the WordPress ecosystem, there's a big fat chance you've come across this young man, I should say.
You're very kind.
I have my moments. Welcome, Nathan.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Nathan. I have nothing more to say. My life is complete. We've achieved success. I've been on Remkes's podcast. I'm very happy to be here.
And I'm very happy for you to be on my podcast for a change because I've been on yours quite a few times by now.
Yeah, you have. You've come onto my show loads of times, and I'm very appreciative. And I hope you'll come on lots more because you're cleverer
Uh,
than I am, and you have better things to say than I do.
uh, I don't know about that, but you're also very kind. Um, for those people who have never listened to you, could you please do a little introduction of who you are, where you're from, what you do?
Yeah, I absolutely can. And the funny thing is, I don't often go on podcasts, and I say that basic question the same time, more or less at the beginning of every episode. And I have this
Yeah.
intuition that that's a really easy question to answer when I say it. And now you've said it to me, I'm realizing actually it's much harder than I thought. So I'll give it a go. My name is Nathan Wrigley. I am a WordPress podcaster now. That is basically what I do for a living, which is very peculiar. I didn't imagine a few years ago that would be the case. I'm based in the UK, as you can probably hear, and I've been working with websites really since the beginning of the internet, right back in the era when it was just, you had to do dial up. And do you
Mm,
remember that noise? That doo, 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 doo,
loved it.
kind of thing. And it was all just typing into a text editor, with p tags and image tags and things like that. And then things like CSS came along, and I got really into all of that. Suddenly, you could separate the presentation layer from the code, and the styling
Yeah.
was in a different place. Prior to that, it was all tables. And then the bit that really changed my life was discovering CMSs. And played around with an absolute ton of them. Always the open source ones. I never shelled out for licenses for things like Expression Engine, which had a
Yeah.
proprietary license system, and tried Joomla, tried lots of different ones, tried Magento, and spent a long time using Drupal, and loved it, really loved it. And the only reason that I moved away from Drupal to WordPress, probably in about 2015, 14, 15, something like that, was because Drupal have what is probably actually quite a good position technologically in that when they go through a point release, so from Drupal 6 to 7, 7 to 8,
Yeah.
they say bye-bye to the previous
Ah,
technology
yeah.
stack, and they're quite willing to just hijack it, and you've got to begin again, which from a
Yeah.
technological point of view is really clever. But when it comes to bite you because your client site suddenly stopped working, that's a bit of a nightmare. So moved over to WordPress 2014, 15, something like that, and haven't looked back. And that was the very pithy answer to your question. And I have two
Kind of.
cats, a guinea pig. I have loads of grey hair. I
Are
talk
you,
far too much.
are you feeding your cats the way Jamie feeds his cats? Like at the end of every video, he asks for likes, and the more likes the people give, the more he feeds his cats. Is that a thing
Gosh,
you
what
do?
happens if no? What happens if he doesn't get too many likes? Do the cats
Oh,
actually
I,
starve?
I was
No,
wondering
we
if that
just
was a
feed them.
British thing.
Although that's a whole thing. Like the environmental impact of owning cats is fairly profound. The amount of stuff we throw away
Okay.
every time we feed a cat is ridiculous.
Yeah. I had one question prepared as you were explaining. So you are on WordPress now. You do that. Your whole line of work revolves around our favorite CMS. I was going to ask, what was your favorite CMS to work with before that? You already answered that. After,
Mm.
um, I'm kind of curious. You said Drupal, and then you said you kind of liked that they cut off essentially version 6 and then start not a new, but certainly almost like a hard fork from 6 to 7 and then changing everything. What did you? what specifically do you like about that? Because from my perspective, the way WordPress is doing has ensured there's always a stable upgrade version. Like you never have to worry about it.
Yeah, I think what I was meaning by that was I did like it. I liked the sort of philosophical position that we'll always be on the latest and greatest thing. But
Hmm.
I didn't like it when it actually had an impact. So when the moment I stepped
Yeah.
out was when Drupal went from 7 to 8, and it was a big, profound change. And anybody in the Drupal community will know what that means. There was all sorts of libraries brought in, which became the default, whereas they simply didn't exist in previous versions. And it was all about the way that the websites were styled. So what it meant was that you couldn't take a website from 7, upgrade to 8, and have any expectation that it would work. But it did mean that 8 was probably going to last a lot longer than 7 would ever do.
Yeah.
And so I liked it from a philosophical point of view, because who doesn't like things to be updated? You log into WordPress, and one of the first things we all do is update the plugins, because we know that's a great idea. And
Yep.
so from that point of view, it was great. But when it bit me, I looked around to see if there were more stable, long-term, backwards compatible options, and immediately WordPress stood out. I had heard of WordPress lots of times, never ever installed it as far as I can remember. And it became obvious that was probably the wrong position. But from Drupal, I think I started with 4 or 5. From 4 to 5 to 6 to 7, it all worked out with minimal work. But 7 to 8 was so breaking that
Yeah.
it was enough. So I think you're right, but I think I was able to get away with it. Yeah.
I remember probably the first proper CMS that I used extensively was Mambo.
Right.
And
I remember
when
that.
Mambo forked into Joomla, I went along with Joomla, and this is 2003, 4. What I absolutely hated about Mambo and Joomla is the upgrade path, for the same reasons that Drupal also made it quite difficult to. I mean, it wasn't just overwrite the files and do an upgrade script and then done. Like Mambo and Joomla, you had to very complex SQL statements that you needed to enter into the database straight. And I barely knew at the time what a database was, let alone how to process those scripts and whatnot. And I thought that was just like the stupidest way to go about. Like, why not automate that? Because it's the same for everybody. Why not have it available in the file so that everybody can just hit that script? It runs in the background and you're done. Couldn't wrap my head around it. Started looking for an alternative, ended up with WordPress. But it's funny how, because I think those hurdles are actually what helped WordPress in its growth.
Oh yeah,
A
yeah.
very, very large portion.
But also, Drupal wasn't quite so bad. You had to run a PHP file in the browser. So you basically had to copy and paste this URL into a browser, and
Yeah.
then it would run the update script, but there was no button to press. And also there was just this fear that things were going to go wrong, and sometimes they did.
Oh,
And then there was no sort of rolling back or anything. Anyway, but the one of the things that I also think contributed to WordPress's success is how, now this statement is going to sound a bit stale, is how beautiful it was in that era. Drupal was pretty ugly. There was
yeah.
almost nothing given over to the way that the buttons looked, or the way that the text was spaced, or the menus. It was just a bit of a mess. It was made by programmers who were keen to
Yeah.
just have some sort of functional CMS, and the eye candy aspect to the back end didn't really matter,
Yeah.
because you knew
I
where to
agree.
go and you knew how many clicks to achieve to get there. And in fact, most of the Drupal community weren't using the mouse. They were remembering the strings that you would add to the end of the
Yeah.
URL to get to where you needed to go. And that was the way that you did it. On most tutorials, it would say, delete this bit of the URL, type this in, and that'll get you where you need to go. And that's the kind of people that they were dealing with. And I remember looking at WordPress the first time, don't know which version it was, but 2014, 15, whatever version that was, and thinking, gosh, it's really nice to look at. Somebody's
Yeah.
put a bit of time into spacing things out, and there's a font which is consistent across all of the UI, and the buttons look the same, and the text boxes and the select boxes all look quite nice. Now, Does it still hold that same appeal? Maybe not. And we're doing things about that. There are definitely
Yeah.
changes afoot.
There's a new dashboard in place, kind of hidden in the Gutenberg plugin, if you want to play with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's I very much recognize the struggle and the, oh wow, this is nice feeling.
Do you know what was interesting though is that what came, because I'd used Drupal for such a long time, I had a real expectation of what a CMS was, and when I came to WordPress, um, I was really quite surprised by how minimal the feature set was. So,
Mm,
as an example, inside of Drupal core was the user permissions. That's all built in. Every permission is available by ticking boxes for every user, and you can create different roles and
yep.
then assign those people to those roles and say, okay, this role is, and it's basically this massive matrix of tick boxes, which is a bit of a thing to get your head around. But once you've understood it, it's pretty straightforward. But also, what we call custom post types was all baked in, and also a kind of visual, like a way to query the database, like a visual UI for creating SQL queries, and it was
Yep.
called views. And once you'd got your head around it, it was sublimely powerful.
Yeah.
And all of that was in core Drupal. And I remember coming to WordPress and thinking, okay, where's the button for the extra field that I want to add to the post?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
didn't exist. And
Yeah.
then I would install things like, I don't know, something like pods or ACF or something like that. And then I think, okay, well, where's it gone? You know, I've filled out this meta box of information. Why isn't it on the post?
Yeah.
Where's it gone? And it was a real learning curve, actually.
Oh, I believe
Um,
that. I believe that. I've
yeah,
played with Drupal a few times, never really took, but
yeah.
there's some design ideas that I like. I think, to be perfectly honest, I think the features that you just mentioned are features that should have been core in WordPress. I genuinely think that would have been the better route. Um, we might end
Especially
up
the
there.
user permissions bit. I think the ability to
Yeah.
create roles in
I mean, I can
seconds.
I can tell you by heart the plugins that I would install right now, like
Yes. Yeah.
Members, ACF Pro.
Yeah.
I'm,
Yeah.
I'm kind of there, but I think that sort of functionality really belongs inside a CMS by default. But
Right, and so it was just the fact that it didn't exist, and I had to go and find it, but also the
yeah,
fact that the Drupal community, because so the way it works in Drupal is that in the same way that in WordPress people develop these add-ons, they're called modules in Drupal. The community coalesced so heavily around some modules that they got put into core, because this for example, this views module, everybody used it. Like nobody
sure,
would build a Drupal website without views in. So eventually, everybody just said, "Well, let's just make sure it's absolutely bulletproof, and then we'll chuck it into core." And that's the way it went. And so it would be akin to Automatic saying, "Right, let's just put, let's say, pods. Let's just make pods part of core because everybody's using it." And but of course, they're not. We don't have
no,
that in the WordPress space. There isn't one absolute incumbent for everything, because there's like 12 of everything.
yeah, yeah, true. Um, yeah, I mean, I can only repeat what I just said. I think this is something that we had version 3, which introduced the menus, which introduced WordPress multi-site being part of WordPress core. WordPress 2.9/3 introduced custom post types and all, the availability of it. I think by
Yeah.
WordPress 4, we should have had it in core. Wait, I didn't mean to be a poet, but there you go.
You mean in a UI that presented itself to the end user? You didn't have to do any
Correct.
kind of coding or copy down some sort of string that you had to then put somewhere else in a template file. You mean it would have just been in the UI?
Yeah.
Anybody could have access. Okay, I would agree.
I think that
Um,
would have forced some more professional ways of doing standardized metadata, which
yeah,
and we ended up not having, and then having plugins like CMB, CMB2,
yeah.
pods, advanced custom fields. Everybody created their own version. I think we kind of, as a whole, you kind of lose track of where things are supposed to go if, like you just said, multiple parties have different ideas of how a particular problem should be solved.
Do you know what's
Um,
interesting? And it's never occurred to me until just now is that I wonder if WordPress putting the brakes on bringing those features in, I wonder if it allowed something like Gutenberg to happen. Because if all of that functionality is in the core product, so let's say I don't know all the permutations for custom
mhm.
fields and all of that, would would Gutenberg have been allowed? Would it have been as easy to pull off? And I know it hasn't been a straightforward journey and what have you, but you'd have to deal with all of that in addition to just the content area, just assuming that a vanilla version of WordPress is basically, you start a post and you've got this blank canvas and nothing else. That's all there is. Whereas with Drupal, I guess there'd be the expectation, okay, we might have to worry about already created custom fields and already
Yeah,
created user permissions and all of this kind of thing.
I think what Gutenberg, the project Gutenberg, what it actually does is solve that particular problem.
Right.
Meaning, it is a singular focus to solve content editing, because that's where it started.
Yeah.
But then there's a whole array of other elements that are connected to it. I think Project Gutenberg is it was not very well received when it was introduced, and I think that is largely at the time most people didn't really get it. Like, I can work just fine with my editor. What are you talking about? And if I need to do something fancy, I'll use dynamic stuff inside of ACF. And what are we talking about? In hindsight, I think most people, if they're honest in checking it out again, they'll see that Project Gutenberg is the attempt to unify, bringing certain outside solutions, whether that be plugins or inspiration elsewhere, bring that inside of WordPress and have a particular opinion on how and what that should look like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. For me, the Gutenberg project is best exemplified right now by things like patterns and these pattern
Yeah,
libraries that are coming along. And what that brings is just so sublime. You click a button and you've got an entire page, and
yeah,
every component of it is a little microcosm of the thing. And this is a paragraph and there's an image, and yeah, you can drag that bit into that bit, and it is sublime. In fact, I was playing with it this morning. I was playing with patterns for a particular purpose, and it just takes the breath away. It is pretty amazing actually what you can do, and the ability for non-skilled non-technical users to be able to create something profoundly good, obviously with the help of third parties in many cases, by
yeah.
clicking a button, is amazing. Really amazing.
We've come a very, very long way, and I'm quite happy to see where we are and what you can do with it. It requires a different mindset from how you would approach building a site and content within that site. But I've said this many times before, but I'm a fan. I switched 2 years ago, 2.5 years.
Hmm.
Said, going forward, this is what I'm going to use, and if there's limitations, I'll find ways around it. There's not been a limitation that I couldn't find a way around it yet, so I think it works fine. Does that mean there aren't limitations? Yes, there are, but you can also be creative in how you solve certain things. There's always the way of entering or creating a block that just is basically just PHP logic that you would have solve other ways in a normal classic theme. You can still do that inside a block theme. You just need to be a little bit more creative in how you do it. But
I
no,
think
I
we're
think yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think we're at a period it's profoundly brilliant, but also we're at a period with full site editing or site editing, where it's also quite confusing. The sort of the
Yeah.
fact that you've got this one UI and then you've got this other UI, and if you click this button, you'll end up in this thing which looks a little bit different. I think it's a
Oh, it
bit
needs to be improved.
yeah,
It needs to be improved
discombobulating. It's
a
just,
lot.
especially for inexperienced users, it's
Yeah.
difficult. And then you've got things like the fact that the core menu doesn't really do very much, and you've got things like the fact that it's not really WYSIWYG. It's very close, but it's not quite.
WYSIWYG-ish.
Yeah, it's WYSIWYG-ish. Yeah, that's good. That is something we should call it.
Yeah.
But it's, if you're careful in what you do, and once you've done it a few times, you can realize, okay, that bit of padding is not actually going to end up looking quite like that. It'll probably be a bit smaller
Yeah.
when I click publish and it's live. But
Yeah.
once you've
But
got your head around it, but it would be nice if those little things didn't exist.
yeah. Yeah. But, you know, building sites with it for 2 years now, seeing the differences then over 2 years where we are now, just give it 2 more years and I mean, that doesn't sound very hopeful, but I mean it in a hopeful
No,
way.
that's right. Can I ask you a question? You asked me to
Sure.
ask you questions, so I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
What is if I installed a vanilla version of WordPress and said, I don't know, you've got to copy this site, would you stay true to core WordPress and just use the core blocks, or would your tooling as of November 2024, would your tooling involve third-party stuff anywhere?
I tend to only want to use third-party stuff when it's needed,
Okay,
and not just add it because I have decided that this is the standard toolbox that I work with. So
right.
I'm a big fan of keeping sites lean and mean as much and as long as I possibly can. Having said that, there's two base block-based themes that I use a lot, which is Rockbase and which is Ollie Pro specifically.
Okay.
Just because of the patterns that are in there, I can just build out most of the desires a client has. Just works in a very nice and a very complete way. And then there's two other themes that are very close to being used frequently. One is Generate Press, and the other is Grade Suite.
Oh, yeah, right.
Uh,
Okay. Yeah.
some of them have different advantages to others. And I think a fifth option of something that I have inherited, but I am enjoying working with it is Cadence. Different
Okay.
approach. Generate Press and Cadence approach things a little differently. But that mix is basically my tool set. And if I need to have certain blocks extra, there's two plugins by Nick Diego that I use basically on any site. So if I were to say this is my tool set, it'd be icon block and it'd be block visibility.
Okay. That's like
Other than that, it's
yeah,
per project. But those
conditional
two
logic
I
kind
end
of
up
stuff.
using. Yeah, conditional logic for when to show a block or hide a block or whatever. Yeah, it's
The
brilliant.
the
Or should be.
the, the one that is a bit of a new one to me that I've not played with in that stack there is Rockbase. And actually, you and I I guess maybe we had an email or something recently, and it must have been you, mentioned that. And I went and had a quick look at it, but that tab
Oh yeah,
quickly got closed, and I never really installed it. But the ones that you mentioned there, really interesting, fascinating that it's all no longer the classic themes. You're going for although I
no,
think Cadence is a classic theme, isn't it? And
typically hybrid, I think.
yeah, okay.
Yeah,
The only thing that I'm installing at the moment, the one thing, is generate blocks,
yeah. Well,
which
generate
is
press, generate blocks. Yeah, those two
yeah,
together. Yeah,
yeah, and basically it's a suite. I mean, suite is a real over exaggeration. A lot of these plugin suites, they really do have a lot of blocks.
well, it's a suite.
But it's a very small. It's only got 6 blocks, but my intuition so far is that I can do more or less anything with those 6 blocks.
Yeah,
And I found that to be really great. And the thing that I was playing with this morning, I was saying about playing with patterns, was Ollie.
yeah.
And man, he has nailed that experience, that
Oh,
modal that pops up, and the
Mike and Patrick
filtering
have,
and the oh
yeah, they've built a beautiful, very flexible solution out there. Yeah,
yeah, it's really nice. And I was particularly playing with this podcast patterns, which are really nice. I think
yeah.
it gave me a few intuitions of how things can be laid out in a podcast, because my site is very old and needs a bit of an update.
Speaking of, your
Mm,
site is wpbuilds.com,
it
but
is.
on your site, there's mostly podcasts. How
Yeah.
did Nathan go from building sites in Drupal, switching to WordPress, and then all of a sudden, hey, I'm doing podcasts. How did that
Yeah.
happen?
Serendipity is how it happened. And I was in a Facebook group. So I landed on WordPress, and at that moment, the page builders had just begun. And
Mm.
many of the ones that are now really, really popular, like Elementor, that didn't exist. But there was a fairly new one. Like, I think it was more or less brand new, Beaver Builder, which I'm sure
Yep.
most people have heard of, if not tried. And I thought that UI was really interesting. The idea of being able to like click a button and be in a thing where you could drag things around and click save, and it basically looked the same. And so I started hanging out in their Facebook group because I wanted support. I wanted help with how to make that product work for me. And I bumped into a chap there called David Wormsley, and he was making YouTube videos about Beaver Builder. So I was watching his videos, and then at some point, I can't quite remember how, at some point I messaged him and said, "Do you want do you want to make a podcast about WordPress?" And he went, "Yeah, all right." And so we decided we'd give it a go. And I said, let's just make 3 or something. Let's just do 3. And if it's any, if either of us don't like it, we'll just back out at that point. So he said, yeah, all right, let's give it a go. So we did. We did 3 episodes. And oh gosh, I don't know what the number is, but it's probably close to 700 or 800 now,
Mm.
with all the combined different shows.
That
And
escalated.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, more if you add in. I've done a bunch of other project which we could get. Yeah. Anyway, um, and so I just kept going. It turns out I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it, and did just kept doing it every single week. And firstly, it was just me and him talking between each other, and then in the end, I said, "Shall I just invite some other people on?" And I did, and then him and I would interview this other person. A few weeks after doing that, he said, "I don't really enjoy the interview, so you carry on doing those, and I'll just meet you every other episode, and it'll just be me and you again." So that's what we did for years and years. And then about a year ago, he decided he wasn't going to use WordPress anymore. He's going all in on HTML and CSS, and it is fascinating what
Yeah.
he is learning. Oh my Lord. If you haven't looked at CSS lately, oh,
Oh,
what
there's
the
yeah,
heck?
yeah.
And so, yeah, that's the story, really. And I've been doing it ever since.
So, well, you have there's 2 podcast. Well,
Yeah.
it already gets complicated me explaining what I think I know about you. But you have This Week in WordPress, which airs live on the Monday,
Yeah.
where you cover basically anything I write in my newsletter on the Friday.
That's what I do. I read your newsletter
Yeah.
and then just regurgitate all the links in that. Yeah. It's
Uh,
brilliant.
but it,
Can you, in fact, could you just release that a whole day earlier? That would be less, less, it'd be less
That's
rushing.
stressful. Yeah. But you cover the previous week.
Yeah.
That's This Week in WordPress. You also
Yeah.
have a podcast on WP
Thursday.
Tavern.
Oh yeah. 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 Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's that?
Okay, so I'll give you the rundown. So yeah, Monday we do the This Week in WordPress, which is turned into so that's live. Feel free to join us. Honestly, it's quite a lot of fun.
It is.
Um, yeah,
Been
yeah,
on there
it
many
is. It
times.
really is.
A lot
We
of fun.
often mess things up, but that's part of the tapestry of life.
Yeah.
And then that gets released as a podcast on a Tuesday. So I edit it, and all the ad bumpers and all that kind of stuff. And then on a Thursday, I do the regular podcast, which is just me interviewing somebody like you, just one on one.
Mhm.
And then also, yeah, do ad hoc shows like video tutorials with. It's never just me. I honestly have nothing to add by myself, so I always do it with somebody else. So I'll have somebody like you on explaining their product, and we'll record that. And then yeah, there's there's an organization called the WP Tavern, which has a long, rich history of writing news. But we started doing a podcast. I think we're on 146 episodes now. Yeah, I think it's 146. This week's coming out with Calvin Alkin from Sneeko with his
Yep.
Command UI product. And that's wptavern.com and /podcast, and you can check it out. And that is actually owned by Matt Mullenweg. And
Via
so that's
Audrey
got a
Capital.
different different flavor to it, shall we say. I how to describe it? I try a little bit harder to edit out the ums and the ahs and things like that for that podcast.
Okay. Yeah. Is that because of the type of audience that it reaches, or the more official status that it gets?
Yeah, I think with my podcast, I'm gonna okay, when we've recorded this episode, then it's totally over to you, isn't it? It's your intuition as to which bits you want to include and which bits you don't, and you can take the view that okay, we said 500 times, but it doesn't matter. Whereas I just took the view that I wanted this to be the best experience for the listener, and by that
Mhm.
I took I just took the notion that I would get rid of all of the bits that weren't relevant. So if we go down a bit of a blind alley in the conversation, and then we somehow say, you know what, that probably wasn't worth saying, rather than keeping that in the audio, I'll take it all out. I'll take the
Okay.
ums and the ahs out. I'll maybe move things around a little bit. Basically, there's more editorial in it, but that's all because I want it to be like that. I've had no instruction as to how it should be, but I feel that it delivers a really nice experience to listen to. It's the best
I
that
would
I can
agree.
do.
I
Yeah.
would agree. From me, I mostly remove the long ums and the pauses behind the long ums, and
Yep.
shorten that a little bit, tighten it up a little bit. But I keep most of it in, because I think it's, this particular podcast is a conversational one, and in
Right.
a
Yeah.
conversation you'll have ums and
Yep.
ahs,
Yeah.
and
I'll tell you, it takes a lot of time. So I use, just like you
oh,
do.
I've heard
I
that.
think you do. I use Descript, and
Yeah.
I go through it word by word and make sure that if I change anything, it still sounds just like it should have sounded. Like if a word sort of glides into an then I won't get rid of that because it'd sound weird. But if there's just a um,
This will be fun
then I'll get rid
editing.
of that. Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Can I do
This
that?
part will be. You
Oh,
may.
really? Wait, hang on. Let me think about this for a minute. What am I going to say now? I'm not sure. No,
Yeah.
that's not good because you'll just edit this one bit out. That's
Yeah.
easy. I needed to have done it over the last 20 minutes.
Yeah. You should have been more sneaky
I
about it.
could, yeah, darn.
But so the switch, I'm assuming, was a gradual one into full on podcasting and recording. Was it always the case that you were a bit of a gadget freak? Because we both have a location where we sit, where we record. We have quite a bit of gear, I would say. Has that always been turned on, or did that get turned on when you started doing this? How did that go?
Yeah. So I started the podcast with no equipment at all, apart from I had a computer.
Mm,
I had a Mac, fairly beaten up old Mac, which was totally fine for the work I needed. I needed an IDE basically,
yeah.
and so I bought a cheap mic on Black Friday, and I think we recorded our first episode like a few weeks after that. And it was a what are they called? Yeti, Blue Yeti, kind of
Yep.
big clunky thing, brilliant, but also has many limitations, but good enough for me at the time. That's all I had. I just plugged it into the Mac. And honestly, if you've got the intuition that you want to start a podcast, you don't need almost anything. If you
No,
want
I
it to
don't find
sound
that.
like TV, yeah, you do. But no, so I didn't. I wasn't obsessive, and I've just acquired all the gadgets over time. And I do obsess about it. I mean, over my shoulder is just like a bunch of stuff that I use, and some of it not that often, and I feel a bit bad. But
Yeah.
there's an edge case where that might come in handy. I often convince myself that I'm going to record things outside in a street somewhere. So I must have
I
this
need this. I
mobile.
need this
Yeah,
here.
need this thing. And then of course it's always done like this. Actually, I do record live because I go to quite a lot of WordPress events
Mhm.
and record people there. So I do need something smaller than what you've got and what I've got. Like we're both recording into a mic, which is attached to an arm, which then goes into an audio interface, which then goes into a computer. The
Let's be
stuff over my
specific. Let's be
shoulder
specific.
allows me to just do all that with stuff that you hold in your hand, really. It's not as good, but it's good enough.
Let's be specific. You say it goes from the ARM into a audio processor. What version do you have? Because that's the question people are going to ask. What does
Yeah.
Nathan
Yeah.
use?
Well, okay. I think we know why this question's coming around, because you've got version 2, haven't you? And I've only got version
I
1,
do.
and I feel bad. What? How's that supposed to make me feel? It's the Rodecaster. It's brilliant. It's the Rodecaster Pro,
Yeah,
and
it
I've
is
got
great.
the first version, which actually, in many ways, I think is going to stand the test of time for a decade or more. I think it'll still sit there for ages. I've got
Oh, probably.
I've got a cheaper mobile version of it. It's called the What's it called? The P4. It's
Yep,
over there somewhere. I
I
can
have
go
it
and
as
get it
well.
and show you know the one, so I don't need to show it to
Yep.
you. And that does a very similar job, but in a much more compact form that kind of would fit in your pocket if you were a giant. But it's pretty portable. You can hold it in your hand,
Yep.
and but yeah, I have the version 1, and you have version.
The Rodecaster Pro 2, which has cool features like I can talk like this.
Yeah, you
Or,
see,
it's
Me
yeah.
on helium.
This is the reason it was bought, right? You're watching the
exactly.
promotional video. What does version 2 do that version 1 doesn't? It does that. I've got to have it. I have to have it. It allows me to sound like Vader.
Look, I didn't have version 1, but if
Oh,
I
okay.
were to have had version 1, I would have bought version 2 anyway. Because
Also, oh, sorry, I
also,
interrupted. I
yeah,
thought you'd finished.
yeah,
Also, I've noticed that you've got the very nice mic, and I've got the poor man's version of the same mic. You've got the Shure Super Duper. What's it called? The SMB7, is it?
yeah, the
Yeah.
SM7B, yes.
Okay, the SM7B, and I've got the MV7, which is not as nice, but
Oh,
pretty
I
pretty
have that one as
nice.
well, but I use that in my office.
See, just showing off now. What the
I
heck? He's got
Yeah,
this redundant good mic just hanging around. That's great. It's really the reason I got this mic. The reason I really like this mic is because it has. So in audio, there's this connection called an XLR, and I'm pointing to it now, and it's
mhm,
a 3-pinned audio, which no normal computer user would ever use. But it also has a USB, which obviously you can go straight into your computer if you want,
yep,
and that's actually the way I've got it running at the minute. Um, and but it so it has both. Whereas the one you've got, you have to have an additional audio interface,
this one, yeah,
like the yeah. But this you've got the one that all the pros. I think that's basically the industry standard, isn't it? The one you've got.
it is. It's not a cheap one, but
Nope.
having had the MV7 first, and then kind of go like, this is nice, but somebody then demonstrated this one to me. I keep forgetting the name.
It's
SM7B.
SM7B.
Yeah, and then I went like, "Ooh, this is a lot nicer, like
Yeah.
a lot."
Oh,
And
now I
like,
feel
oh,
bad.
I know I got to fix that. I mean, as somebody who uh, likes gadgets and understands the technical difference between one and the other, uh, it's difficult not to grab it. I mean, do you technically need it to start a podcast or record courses for WordPress or whatnot? Not really. I mean,
Do you know what's really interesting about the whole podcast thing is that the demographics of a podcast, obviously, depending on the niche that you decide to go down,
mhm,
your audience will differ. But typically, people are listening to podcasts when they're doing something else. It's that kind of format. It's not like watching the TV where you sat down. The fact that it's visual requires your head to be locked in a particular direction. Really, a podcast audience are probably doing something else. It's probably on the phone, and they're
yeah,
out in the garden doing something. They might be in the kitchen preparing something, at work, on the way. And commute is a really good one because it's like
yeah,
often a solid amount of time every day. The point being that there's background noise. There's usually something else going on in their life, and they're not giving it their full concentration. So whilst the audio needs to be good, I don't like if it was a course that you'd made and the visuals. I think that the audio of that would have to be exceptional. But I think often for
yeah.
a podcast, given where it's being consumed, I don't think it needs to be the very very best all the time. And the software nowadays and
It's
the
just so good.
AI behind the software can
Yeah,
take genuinely terrible recordings and make them sound good. It's beyond understanding.
that's the Descript, right?
Yeah. Studio
I've had
sound.
I've had people on my podcast, and which I'm sure you've had as well, where they don't have a proper mic and they use maybe their iPhone headset, the AirPods or whatever. And that recording is okay, but it's not good. You can hear the metallic sound of it, I guess. And to then turn on studio sound inside a Descript and hear that magic be done to the audio is just, I'm amazed every single time that I process that and go like, whoa, how could it possibly enhance it this much? It's crazy.
I think if I could point to one piece of software that's changed my life the most, it's WordPress. But
Mhm.
beyond that, it would be Descript.
Really?
If you're into creating video content or audio content, it really is phenomenal. And I don't know how you do that. Honestly, this is getting so nerdy. If you do you render all the video on their side as well, so that it doesn't even like consume the CPU resources of your device. So
Yep.
typically, if you use like Final Cut Pro or Camtasia or whatever, then you would
Render.
render a video and the fans would come on and you'd wait an hour and it would do it all in the background, and your computer might become unusable. With Descript, it does it all on their cloud and it takes seconds. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, we went down a complete rabbit hole of audio nerdness.
But I mean, I'm pretty sure these are the questions people have when you have one podcasting person talking to another podcasting person.
Well,
Like,
that's true.
okay,
Yeah.
what are the
Yeah.
differences? What do you use? Well, we've established that I use a better mic, but your mic is awesome as well.
Mhm.
We've established I have just a newer version, simply because I started later.
I see a pattern emerging here. Oh, yeah, and you've got a nicer like environment. Um, my
Yeah,
my environment is anything. Well, don't get me wrong; it's not bad, but I haven't really put a lot of thought into the room that I'm in. Whereas you've got it all. You've done the playbook. It's really nice. You're a pro, Remkus. That's the thing.
no, so I pretend to be a pro, and I learn from pros like you. Come on.
Oh, you're very kind. But I think what's the words? The teacher has sorry, the pupil has become the teacher or something like that in this case.
Maybe on a few elements, but not
No, I
really.
think it's nice. Although I think I will do something with this space. I've got this
Do
intuition
tell.
that in the near future I'm going to paint it up a bit like yours, but I'm going to go with tartan or paisley in the background. I'm going to have
Yeah.
loads of flashing, moving lights. Lots
Are
of
you gonna
strobe
you're going
effects. That kind of thing.
are you going to change your position like 90 degrees? Like have
Yeah,
the
I'm gonna. Yeah, I think I'm gonna sit with my back to that wall, which currently has
a whiteboard?
I don't know if you can see that it says all sorts of disparaging things, but my kids come in here and write things that I then forget to delete. At the
I think
moment,
it
it's
says
quite
hi,
nice.
Dad.
It says hi, Dad, love you, which is quite
Yeah.
nice. That's quite a
Yeah.
nice one. And then it says, I don't know why this one's there. It says visit corndogcorndog.com, which I actually did. It's really good.
Oh,
You
is
should
it
do
really?
that. Well, I mean, it does one thing, and it shows
Yeah.
you a corn dog with really interesting music. So that's
Okay.
what happens. I come in and there's just this screed of
I I
nonsense
I
written
can
by my.
I can see the desire to professionalize that. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want corn dog
So this
written
will
on
be
your
your winter
podcast.
project? This is something
Oh, yeah. Honestly, Remkus, I do like the 12-year plan. So anything that I say now could well be it might come to fruition in 2038 or something like that. No, this is a lick of paint, a new and turn the table round. So yeah, I think I'll probably do it quite soon. But I have before we hit record, I pestered you for quite a while and
yeah.
learned how you'd got everything set up. And Remkus was kind enough to show me what it's like when you turn the other side around, and it's messy. That's all I'm going to say. It's messy.
It's just appearances. This is just
It's the same for me. Just
yeah.
over there is that's where I throw the stuff that's not supposed to be behind me. It's just and it just piles up. There's a lot.
I'm fortunate enough to have a dedicated space there where I have my
Yeah.
studio.
Yeah.
I used to, like when I started, I needed to have it combined in the one room. That's a
Mhm.
challenge. I now have a separate studio from my office. So when I get here, it's the mindset of I'm recording,
Oh,
which
yeah, nice.
automatically starts as soon as I walk in, right? Because everything is set for recording. My camera doesn't move, my lights don't move. Um, the lights in the background I just turn on or off. I even have that on my phone where I basically hit one click and everything is turned on. All of these things just make it easier and lower the barrier, because I think it's important to realize that what most people don't get, that uh, recording a video, or actually a podcast or whatever, it's not no effort. It's most certainly effort. It's most certainly adding another layer of, there's a camera in front of me. I'm looking at a big black hole and I'm recording myself. It's one of the stupidest things you can do. And well, not because of you, Nathan, but for the audio listeners, Nathan was grimacing and making
Yeah,
it.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But it's that needed to be as low as a barrier for me as I possibly could make it, which is why I have what I have.
Yeah, I think it is nice.
Long-winded answer, but that's how it works for me.
Yeah, if you are going to commit to doing a podcast, and honestly, I think it's such a fun thing to do ultimately,
Mhm.
then yeah, do recognize it's going to be a bit of work. It's not going to be necessarily difficult. In fact, that's
Yeah.
true, right? Not a single thing that we do is individually difficult,
No,
but it is time consuming, and sometimes it
very
can be a
much.
slog, and you have to fight the apathy monster. You have to fight, like, because there's nobody telling you you must do it. It's just you set yourself up to do it, so you're going to do it. At the beginning, there's probably going to be no financial requirement to do it, because you probably won't have any revenue stream from it, so you just commit to doing it, and you've got to keep that whole thing going. It's one of the few things I've been able to do like that. But having everything in one space is really nice. It's really nice.
It's a game
Um,
changer for me.
yep, yep.
If
So I'm going to
yeah,
get all of your. I'm going to. Okay, I have a new plan. I've just invented it. I'm going to buy all the same stuff as you,
yeah,
including right down to the shelf behind you and the little banners that you've got there and the
yeah.
lights and all. And I'm going to just have what you've got. And I'm going to start a podcast, but it's going to be called Within WordPress 2. It's
I
going to be
would
like
applaud,
one version higher.
I would applaud you for that. I mean, if you actually do that, you will become internet famous.
Yeah, and I'm going to buy all the domain names with
Yeah,
2, 3, 4,
with the
5, 6,
two.
7, all the way up to like 1,000. I'm not going to do any of that. I'll probably be staying exactly as I am for the next 12 years, as I said.
Yeah, and that's fine. But I do think it's a great idea that you use that wall to the right of you as the backdrop,
Yeah.
because you can
Yeah, and
then,
I can remove this thing here, which
yeah,
has the children's messaging on it.
painted a nice color, have some interesting things in the background. I mean, it's a great. Every single thing I have, well, not every single thing. I'm looking at it and go like, no, no, not every single thing, but most of the stuff that I have is in some way it says something about me. There's either WordPress related stuff, or the Pacific Coastal Highway one was one of the best trips I've ever driven. It's just
Nice.
fun stuff that I have here. And then that works for me. Again, for me, it's all about lowering the barrier. Don't have to think about it. It's set. Don't touch it. Just turn it on, sit,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
get into record mode.
Yeah. Nice.
In terms of what you do currently and what you will do in the next phase of whatever is happening next in Nathan's career, do you anticipate doing different things, additional things?
Yes.
You super happy? Yeah, yes.
Yeah. Interesting question. I'm not going to go back to being like, hopefully, oh gosh, I mean, I'm saying this like it's definitely going to, who knows how the wind will blow. My
Yeah.
intention isn't to go back to building client websites. I did years and years of that and I enjoed
Yeah.
it, but I now realize that I enjoy this kind of approach to life and this kind of work much more.
Yeah.
My intention is to keep creating content, but I think in the not too distant future, I'm going to be doing something that's not related to WordPress, which will be a departure for me. Like totally nothing to do with WordPress at all. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes. I stumbled into this, so I don't really have a particular plan of action. I was saying to you before we hit record that I don't even know what it is yet. I won't get into that, but it's by this time next week I'll know what it is. But I am going to try different avenues, but it will be based around making content.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Interesting. Particularly the part where you say it's not going to be revolved around WordPress.
No, or web, or anything like that.
Or web even, geez.
Yeah. Well, if I knew, I'd tell
I
you.
know you.
Yeah, but I don't. And there's another. Honestly, the minute I know, I'll tell you. But there's a weird element to it that obviously you can gauge is that I don't know.
That's
But yeah, it's
I'm
as
trying to
confusing
wrap
for
my
me
head
as it is
around.
for you.
Okay, good. That's the confirmation I was looking for. Okay, but that's exciting. So that means you are looking at expanding whatever it is you do. The reason I asked is you already answered my second question, which was, are you actually still doing client sites in any way, shape, or form? But I was kind of curious if that switch from building stuff, WP builds, if that transference into recording content in various ways, if that sort of line is still happening, like, are you continuing even deeper down that path, or not at all? Was basically my
Yeah.
question. The question.
So one of the nice things about doing what I do is that I get to talk on a more or less daily basis with people in the WordPress space, and many of them are making things like
Yeah.
products and services and what have you. And part of the procedure for understanding what they've done is to try it out. So I'm really good at spinning up local environments and installing this one plugin and then trying it out and experimenting with it and then having the interview and then putting it to one side, and out comes the next one. So but also, given that I do this WordPress weekly news thing, that also means that I have to play with core WordPress quite a lot and try it
Yep.
and try to do things. But that's all driven by my own curiosity. So there's no client in this case breathing down my neck saying this thing has to achieve this. If I run into a roadblock, I'll try and fix it. But if I can't, I just think, okay, that's the road, and that's the way it ended for that particular plugin. Can't make that work. That's fine. I'm not going to try and write some custom code to make it work. So I'm still very much into tinkering and playing with WordPress, but it doesn't have a client website at the end of it. It doesn't have a finished goal of a website at the end of it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a nice position to be in. I really enjoy that tinkering. And honestly, I probably recycle about 30 WordPress websites a month, something like that, just playing with things for 10 minutes here and there. And Playground is my new best friend.
I was going to ask, what do you use to build those sites? Do you use Drupal or just
I've been
Playground?
using, without a doubt, I've been using local for years and years and years. In fact, when it was, what was it called? Like years ago, it was called Press something. And then Flywheel bought whatever that was. And it's not, I want to say Pressable, but that's a well-known hosting company, and it's not that. It was Pressmatic.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah. So it was called Pressmatic, and it was built by this guy, and he sold it to Flywheel. Flywheel then sold it to WP Engine, who are maybe there was other owners in between. I don't know, but that's where it resides at the moment. But then about I don't know, 7 or 8 months ago, Playground came along. No, I mean in a way which was like reliable and usable, and so I'm using Playground and Studio. But for me, the use case is usually install a plugin, play with it, shut it down. So I don't need all the studio bits or the local bits typically anymore. It's usually fine for me to just install via playground.wordpress.net. You can do it that way. So that's usually what I'm doing. Yeah.
That's a very cool use case for Playground. I think
Yeah.
the WordPress community as a whole still doesn't have a full grasp of what you could do with Playground.
Oh,
I mean,
it.
just
Yeah.
consider that WordPress is just your CMS, meaning it's a content management system. That's it. You can add to it whatever you like. You can make it look like whatever you like, and thus a WordPress installation could be a standalone app if you would like it to be. And if you consider that perspective, my lord, is there any limitation to what you can build?
I did an interview with a chap called Adam Zelensky, and
Yep,
Adam
main
Zelensky
developer
works.
for Playground.
Right, yeah. So he was the guy that conceived Playground. Really, just built it in a couple of weeks, just on a whim, and then showed it to a few of his fellow colleagues at Automatic. And I think the intuition then was, yeah, it's interesting, but so what? But he pursued it, and then I think enough people saw it that they thought, gosh, actually, do you know what? This is profound,
Yeah,
and
it is.
that interview probably took place about, I don't know, 6 months ago, something like that. There's so much that has happened in that 6 months, including the ability to kind of retain the website. So you close the browser and it now no longer dies. But I got a strong sense that the the app store to the iPhone is akin to Playground, what it is to WordPress. What
In
I
a way,
mean is that it's
yeah,
going to be able, you're going to be able to do things inside of WordPress that are hitherto unimagined because of Playground, in the
yeah,
same way that Apple launched the iPhone. And do you remember the very first version of it? I mean, it was fascinating. The UI was brilliant, and it was marvelous to see that big screen in your hand. But you couldn't
yep,
do much. And then the App Store came along, and suddenly it was like, ooh, yeah, interesting. And I know we've got plugins and the repository and all that, but I do think that on a fairly profound level, the Playground is going to enable organizations to use it in ways hitherto unimagined. And maybe a really good example would just be, I don't know, coding for kids. Here, kids, today's lesson is all about learning how to do this. Click that link that I've just sent to your the shared class email account,
yep,
and up comes a website with all the information that you need, including all the videos and everything, and it's
exactly.
kind of just disposable for that
Yep,
lesson, So that
yep,
was a fairly trite example that I just thought up on the fly, but you can imagine that a thousand ways. But also the capacity for developers to riff around it and come up with what it can do is going to be pretty profound. I think
yep.
amazing, amazing.
I agree. I think it's for me, it's my the project that I'm most excited about. What it will allow us to do.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I don't. It's hard for me to pin a timeline to it, but um, I think somewhere in 25 we'll have a version of Playground where we can just really build anything into it that you would like, and if it needs outside connections for this and that, you can. And if it needs to stay active all the time, it can. All of
Right,
these are
right.
limitations that we kind of are still kind of working around and whatnot. But I think it's going to be wild to see what Playground will allow us to do.
Yeah,
Genuine
and like I said,
wild.
in the same way that we didn't know what the iPhone developers would do, but they invented a whole new way of just interacting with life. Basically,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
feel that it's going to be possible to do that. And imagine just like pressing a button on your phone, and you've got a WordPress website on your phone, and you mix AI in the blend with there. And I don't know,
Mm,
it really is difficult for me to get a hold on what the possibilities are, but I just see this sort of bright vista, this horizon, which is just, really, really encouraging. And I don't see any other project like it elsewhere. It is pretty unique. Um, anyway, there we go.
I agree. I agree. So bright futures ahead.
Nice. We've had some good news in amongst some interesting times lately. It's good to focus on the fact that there's a boatload of really fun stuff happening as well.
There is, and I think I'd like to say on that bombshell. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Join us next time on WP Builds when we'll also have a different guest. But it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you today, Remkus. See you next time on
Likewise,
WP
man.
Build.
Thanks so much, man.
You're welcome.